Hi.
Hi, I am the Literature Maestro, and welcome back to the analysis course where confusion ends and confidence begins. In our last video, I taught you how to utilize your initial impression of an authorial choice to kickstart your analysis and how that's the first and rudimentary inference that we can make. We also called that the level 1 analysis. Then I provided you with some sentence templates, after which we attempted 2 practice problems to really cement our learning. If you haven't watched that first video, the first episode, I would strongly recommend watching that first, since this lesson will build on top of what we learned in that previous episode. In this episode, we are going to look at what I call the broader inference, and how we can derive that from our association inference in order to add depth to our analysis. And with that, let us begin our level 2 analysis. Once you have considered the associations your mind makes when witnessing an authorial choice, the next step for us is to consider what those associations tell us about something else in the text. This is usually the characters. In our last video, we looked at this example. He scurried to the room like a rat. Our association inference consisted of 3 words: sneakiness, evasion, and fear. Because as soon as we think about a rat, those are the 3 qualities that typically come to our mind. As a result, we utilized our template to come up with the following level 1 analysis. John's use of the simile "like a rat" when describing the Count evokes the idea of sneakiness, evasion, and fear. Now, to make further inroads in this analysis, or in other words, to get to our level 2 analysis, we must consider what this simile tells us about the Count. What does this tell us about the character being mentioned? The template for a broader inference looks something like this. This suggests that plus last name of author plus broader inference. So in our example, it might look something like this. This suggests that John characterizes the Count as someone who is cowardly and sneaky. Notice how we went from our initial impressions, our associations, and now we're connecting it to the character in question. This is typically what we do in the broader inference. We usually connect our associations with what we have learned or what we can figure out about a character. But it doesn't always have to be a character, but most of the time it is. To understand level 2 analysis and broader inference more clearly, let's take another example, this time from Star Wars.
Anakin's gone. I am what remains.
So the quote here is, "Anakin is gone. I am what remains." Let's start by identifying first the authorial choice. The authorial choice here would be paradox, because we know as the audience that I and Anakin refers to one and the same person, so he can't be gone and remain at the same time from a literal perspective. Let's start first with our association inference, or our level 1 analysis. Lucas's use of the paradox "Anakin is gone" when he has Darth Vader describe the death of his former self evokes the idea of transformation and irreversible change. Now let's add our broader inference here. This suggests that Vader sees himself as a distinct individual from Anakin Skywalker with different values, appearance, and beliefs. Notice how we have used our association inference to figure out something deeper about the character. Now we will move on to an advanced tip that can allow us to write more compelling broader inferences. If you want to make your broader inferences sound more impressive and more compelling, use what I call the far from contrast. To demonstrate this, consider the following 2 inferences. Number 1, my client is innocent. Number 2, My client, far from the monster the prosecution has portrayed him to be, is instead utterly innocent. Which one sounds more compelling to you? It's likely to be the second one. This is because the second one utilizes contrast between how the client has been portrayed as opposed to who he actually is. You can leverage the same technique. Let's apply this to our previous broader inference. This suggests that Vader, far from seeing himself as Anakin or retaining elements of his former self, instead sees himself as a distinct individual from Anakin Skywalker, with different values, appearance, and beliefs. As you can see, this sounds much better. This is because of the way our minds work. We inherently understand things better through the lens of contrast. We understand up because we know what down means. We understand what good means because we know what bad means.
Yes, I know that.
There's even a philosophical movement based in this fundamental assumption called structuralism, where nothing has inherent meaning but is only meaningful because we know what it is not. This is ultimately why the far from contrast can enrich your broader inferences and make them sound far more sophisticated. Now let's move on to our practice problems. Our first practice problem comes from Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Love is a smoke made with the fume of sighs. I'll now point out what the authorial choice is. The authorial choice here is a metaphor. Love is being compared to a smoke, but there's a second authorial choice as well. A second metaphor, fume of sighs. So as you're writing your inferences, you have to analyze both of those authorial choices at the same time. Let's start our timer. Alright, now that the time is up, let us consider what associations pop up into our mind when we think about these two metaphors. The first metaphor is that of a smoke. So when I think about smoke, I'm instantly thinking about things being blurry because smoke tends to make it hard to see through things. And when I think about the second metaphor, fume of sighs, well, when I think about people sighing, I associate that with exasperation and frustration. So the association could not be more clear here. So keeping that in mind, let us start our analysis. Shakespeare's use of the metaphor love is a smoke coupled with another metaphor, fume of sighs, evokes the idea of blurriness and frustration. Since this quote is said by Romeo before he meets Juliet, while he is in love with Rosaline, this ultimately gives us a glimpse into how Romeo feels about love before he's experienced true love. As such, our broader inference would look something like this. This suggests that Romeo, far from considering love to be a force that provides peace and tranquility, instead considers it to be a force that causes confusion and anxiety. And with that, we are done with our first practice problem. Now we move on to our second practice problem. This quote comes from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. The authorial choice in this quote is clearly a metaphor because we're comparing death to an adventure without the use of the word like or as. Now I'll give you a minute and I want you to consider what your inferences will be. Alright, now let's jump into it. When I think about the metaphor of an adventure, I think about something that causes excitement. I think about something that I'm looking forward to. I'm thinking about something where there's exploration, where there's discovery, where there's a sense of thrill. As such, my association inference would look something like this. Rowling's use of the metaphor adventure evokes the idea of excitement and discovery. Now we move on to our broader inference. Now, this quote is said by the character of Dumbledore, and we associate that character with wisdom. So, our broader inference would look something like this. This suggests that Dumbledore, far from considering death to be something to be dreaded and avoided, instead sees it as something that should be looked forward to. And with that, we are done with our second practice problem. I hope you found the video useful. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.